Hello, today you've joined the Kubeflow community call for July 23rd, 2023. This is a recorded meeting and it is governed by the CNCF Code of Conduct. We have quite a fantastic announcements and solutions today. But before we get into that, we're going to look at our agenda and walk through a couple items. So why don't we start off with first, if there are any introductions or topics people want to bring up as we get started here today.
Yeah, maybe we can kick off. So let me just introduce myself first. So everyone, I'm Lindsay, but I'm Andre. I work at Apple right now in the Kubeflow steering committee. Been there for the last 6 years, mostly maintaining training operator and Khatib components, but try to contribute in other parts of Kubeflow as well. So here, Vadim, you can also introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi guys. So I'm Vadim. I'm working on data platform as a UI engineer. That's it.
Yeah, a few folks from my team as well. If you want to chime in and introduce yourself, be great.
Okay, I can chime in. Hi, I'm Peter. So I'm Andrew's teammate here at Apple. I work on our cloud offerings for the Jupyter Lab offering and do kernel integration and other stuff and a lot of customer support. Nice to meet you all.
I can go next too. So I'm also from Andre's team. My name's Zach. I work at Apple. I've been around the Jupyter community for a little over a decade, serving on the Jupyter Executive Council. I've kind of worked across the stack, both front end and back end. And so I think what we're going to talk about today, I think Andre's got it proposed on the agenda, is to talk about how do you build a pluggable UI that can serve many different vendors or stakeholders and have that thing last for a decade. How do you build something that's sustainable for the long term on the front end? So we might be able to offer just some anecdotes from the Jupyter community. So I'm kind of here hopefully to represent that. But I'm sure he'll give an intro further for the Kubeflow guys.
Great. Anybody else? Well, welcome to everyone, and very excited to hear the topics that y'all have teed up. Like to get to those relatively quickly, but I do believe since today is an important day in our release efforts, would like to get an update on how we're doing on release 1.9. Do we have someone that can give us an update on that? Guess we have Stefano who's joining. Maybe he can give us an update on 1.9. Or perhaps I don't see Ricardo.
If Stefano doesn't want to answer, I can say something.
Hey, just heard my name. Sorry.
No, it's all right. We're just trying to get an update on 1.9 for the community. Quick update.
Okay. Yeah, if Ricardo doesn't join, I can just summarize what happened yesterday.
What do we want to do? Do you think Ricardo's out? Sometimes that maybe he's got a conflict at the beginning of this meeting. Maybe we should leave the release update for later. What do you think?
Okay. I don't know. I'll ask him quickly on Slack. He didn't tell me anything.
He doesn't tell you anything. He's a very good communicator anyway. If he comes back. Why don't we go ahead and move on to the first items on
So just, if you want, I can give you an update. I think I attended yesterday call quickly. So yeah, I know that the release for manifests, I think they released the branch, right? The 1.9 branch. Also, yesterday we recorded the first part of our release, updates on YouTube channel, like our release video. So we're still waiting from some working groups like notebooks, pipelines, serving to complete their section. But I guess right now, like the pending items is just publish the blog post, publish the video, and make the final announcement, right, to the community. I think the branch already been cut, if I remember correctly, in the manifest. Julius, if you know exactly, like let me know.
Yes, it has been cut, and we got approval for more than 50% of the distributions. I think in practice, most distributions are tested. There's still some known issues. I linked them in the release notes, and yeah, let's see whether we need a 1.9.1.
Sounds good. Yeah, I see Ricardo also join. If you want to add something like from your side, feel free to chime in.
Hey guys, sorry. Had a contractor here. I believe we are still in the release update, right?
Yeah, we're right
Yes.
at the beginning. Go ahead and take it from the top, you know, on the release update.
Okay. So first of all, I'm sorry about the late. I had a contractor here and it took longer than expected. So TLDR, we already had the Kubeflow 9 release cut. What we're doing right now is just finishing some last touches on the documentation. We're gonna publish the blog post and then we're gonna send the announcement to the Kubeflow discussion with the blog post and the release notes that it's about to be merged to the website pretty soon. I think that's it. With 1.9 already released, all I can say is let's celebrate for another good release. Of course, I saw people already talking about patch releases. I think this is the discussion that we should do after the retrospective meeting that is going to happen next Monday on July 29th. After that, we'll probably need to work on two different efforts. One is start establishing a new release team for 1.10 release and planning for upcoming patch releases for 1.9. I believe that's it. I would like to use that time to say thank you so much for trusting my work. I'm very happy to see what we've done so far with 1.9, and I really expect that for 1.9, we can use this as a reference for the upcoming releases to be as bigger in terms of feature proposals and new components. And we know that there's a lot of good stuff to come. And yeah, guess that's it. And any questions, comments?
I have a few questions. They may be tactical and perhaps they're needed in a follow-up release team meeting call, but to be specific, you know, the blog post and the video and the branch cut, are those going to happen? Because often what we find is, you know, it's hard to coordinate those all at the same time. It's fine if they're not, but, you know, are we thinking that that'll happen today, tomorrow, Thursday? What's kind of our gut feel on some of those things?
Yeah, that's a good question, Josh, because unfortunately, those tasks that I just mentioned, it's not under my control. I need people to help me with reviewing and approving the PRs. And the same applies to the blog post. So with that, if we have all of these PRs already merged, we're free to share across the social media and the mailing list about the new 1.9 release. But it all depends on how much people are willing to work on reviewing and approving the PRs that we need for finishing that work.
Okay. So I saw the blog post, or is the blog post basically finished? I mean, I know Stefano and you had done a lot of
Yeah.
work on that. Is that
Yes, look,
basically?
from my perspective, it's just ready to go. And the only blocker is merging the website page, the 1.9 release, so that we can link to that. Once we merge that PR, we'll have the link allotted to the blog post, and then we can merge that one as well. Unless someone wants to take another pass at reviewing it. Otherwise, I think we're good
We'll
to
have the
go.
website done, we'll have the blog post, and then the manifest the manifest page is up too, right? Is 1.9, isn't there usually an update to the GitHub manifest working group page?
Yes, I think it's in the release, on the release page in Kubeflow/manifest.
Okay, so we got that one. And then what about the X announcement and the Google Analytics?
Yeah,
When we
look,
get the, sorry, go ahead.
No, take it. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that when we get the announcement, the Kubeflow discussion, I was about to reach out to Amber and start sharing throughout the social media, but probably Stefano can help with that as well. I think all we need right now, having the blog post published, we can trigger all the other work in parallel.
Yeah, I'm very interested that we make sure we capture the analytics if we can. So
Okay.
if possible, it would be very nice to see where we're driving people, how many, that type of stuff. And so I guess request, I mean, it doesn't have to happen, but if we can just make sure that that's connected to whatever we're putting up, that would be great, right? Okay.
That's right, Josh. I have one last topic
Yeah.
just came
Go
to my
ahead.
head. Yesterday during the release team meeting, we recorded the video with the feature updates for Kubeflow 9. Of course, we record the video with the people who are present at the meeting, but there's still some other working groups that we would like some help with recording a 2-minute video to talk about their own working group features. Those working groups that I'm looking for some updates is the notebooks and pipelines. So if the working group leads for both pipelines and notebooks are present in this meeting, please, if you can record a 2-minute video with the features for 1.9 in their respective working groups, send to me, and then I'll send to Mateo, who's going to do some video editing for us to merge all the other videos we already have, and then we can publish this to YouTube as well.
Yeah, I mean, a potential request, and I'm not saying that we should do this, but being that we have some dangling items here a little bit, we may want to have a release team meeting perhaps tomorrow, something like that, and invite those working groups to see if they would do the recording, but also to try down a couple other items. You know, just being a little proactive to kind of bring them to the table. Maybe that's one way to get that recording done. And sometimes it's easier if you can record them both together, because I think well, I guess they're not right next to each other, are they? They're not. We don't go from notebooks to pipelines in the prezo. Okay, well, I'll let you guys handle that, but I just consider potentially, you know, bringing the release team together. I would one more time this week to tie up the dangling items. Ricardo, it's up to you how you want to do it, but it might help you get things done.
Okay. I took that note. Thank
Yeah,
you.
even if it's only 30 minutes, I would do it. All right. Well, I think this was a great job. I listened to the recording of the 1.9 yesterday. I think everybody did a fabulous job of putting that together. I look for the, the edits, and let's try to get this done. I'm going to ask you for an unfair request, Ricardo and Stefano. Can you guys kind of think about if Thursday or Friday was, kind of worst case on finishing up a lot of these items? Do you guys feel, I mean, can we get to a place where, can we pick a date?
Well, I would say if it depends on me, only on me, I would say I could finish all of this today. But like I said, if I have at least one approver that could help me with approving all we need for publishing the blog post and merging the release notes, we can do all of this today. So all I need is someone to approve those PRs, and then we can try to finish today, maybe tomorrow.
Right, but we still got to report. We got to record those videos, right? Or we don't have to.
Oh, the videos, yeah. For the video, I plan to finish this by end of this week. Again, it all depends on the other working group leads to finish their recordings, and then we can merge them.
So the video is non-blocking. I agree. Okay.
That's right.
Okay, fantastic. All right, I'll leave those in your hands. You've done a great job. So thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, fantastic. All right, let's move on to the Jupyter design language item. Do you guys need to present something?
Yeah, first of all, let me just give you a little bit of context of why we actually, what we want to do. So I know that quite recently Stefano and Edgar was like driving the idea of how we can centralize our UI developments across different Kubeflow components. So first of all, we want to like understand the problems of existing Kubeflow components UI and see how we can improve them, because today we have a lot of inconsistency between applications. Like for example, Kubeflow pipelines using one technology and one sort of the UI kits. So other components like a tip, notebooks, or model web apps using another. And I know we kind of like starting to see how we can create a Kubeflow design language. So the idea of like today's discussion would be like, we just want to see how other communities solve the problem of how to serve front end for the very long time. Specifically, like why we're speaking about Jupyter, because Jupyter was like, in the industry for like last 12 years, right? And like, I think it would be very beneficial for us to understand what technologies other open source communities are using and how it can actually benefit us moving forward, right? Maybe we can learn something. Maybe we can see how we can make our UI vendor neutral to make sure other distributions can benefit from it and actually consume it as a product, right? So I think like I know we have a a preparation doc from Stefano and from Eder that we are working on, and I think that we will present maybe in some other like community meetings. But today we just maybe speak about Jupyter, what they're doing, and how, is there any something that we can learn from it for us as a community moving forward. Yeah. Any questions maybe from the community before Zach can get started? Why am I doing this maybe? All right, then in that case, Zach, you can just move on, maybe just, give a brief overview what we can speak about, and then maybe we can follow up on some questions.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, we don't really have anything to present. I think Andre and I work together very closely. We've thought a lot about the cross integration between Kubeflow and Jupyter, because there's, notebooks provide kind of a portal into all kinds of really interesting technologies. It's somewhat found itself as a common front end and many different organizations and research institutes, and even in academic settings with just students running on their local laptops. But because we work so closely together, we talk all the time about what we can learn from one another's communities and technologies. And so we were just chatting kind of one-on-one one time about how hard it is to build a front end that is able to serve the many stakeholders that show up to the table in an open source community, so that they can make that front end integrated with their internal services and other products, but also have a common flavor in their context. So maybe that's just like, logos and color designs and stuff like that. But also you might be bringing a whole different suite of tools at one company or organization that another company doesn't have. And so, how do you make a thing that's like a Swiss Army knife here for everyone? And Jupyter is most known for this thing called the notebook. We had, this notebook interface that we put out back in, I think it was 2011, maybe 2012 when the first release came out. And then it's evolved to become much more than that. And in 2016, we had to rewrite the whole interface because, all the different front-end frameworks were changing pretty dramatically and rapidly. We were still using jQuery and Bootstrap combinations to write a front-end web application. And so that was extremely difficult to maintain because of the kind of spaghetti logic that you get from those two tools. And then with kind of this notion of a virtual DOM coming onto the scene with React and other libraries like that, there was a better way to write things, but it also gave us an opportunity to step back and take an interface that people really loved, and then think about how do we make it more powerful and how do we allow it to be integrated with the ecosystem around the tools that were emerging for data science and other purposes. And so, so what we did was start from scratch. We went through the problem of having to try to choose a technology, like a framework, like there's Angular, there's Vue, there's React, although in this time those weren't very mature. So it was a little easier for us to make the decision. And then we had to go through, how do we provide, like, what should Jupyter own as the kind of vendor neutral open source standard? And I think we came up with what is the minimal set of things that Jupyter should own, and then let everybody build on top of that. So we really viewed our job as creating building blocks for the community, and then let folks build Lego sets from those blocks. That's like the analogy I like to use. So I can maybe share what some of those are in the front end context. And then I think what we reached was an actual evolution of our front end building blocks that hopefully will be sustained. They've been around now. I think that suite of tools has been around for 8 years, but I don't see it going away anytime soon. And we see people building off of it like crazy. And so it's been really successful, I think, in our experience. So I can maybe work through the two levels that I see from our experience that we ran into of how do we make this thing the most usable to other people. And full disclosure, I'm not a full-time UI engineer. There's definitely people way more experienced in this. This is more of a high-level thinking that is shared across the Jupyter community for designing these tools. So pardon me or forgive me if I say anything naive here, but really the two levels we chose, or I observe us choosing for building a sustainable UI, has been, one, setting up a design language for CSS variables. So what does Jupyter own? Jupyter owns CSS variables, just those names, and then lets people tap into those variables and flavor them with whatever, font, color, and those things that work for their organization. So as long as we own the variable names, then other people can write themes using those variable names and let it permeate the application. So people in the UI space already know this stuff, but that was our first level of like a very minimal thing is let's offer to people who are building things on top of Jupyter, let's offer them a thing that Jupyter owns, which is a set of variable names that they can overwrite and apply across their application, a single set of colors, fonts, and all those kinds of styles. And then from an architecture standpoint and an API standpoint, the model we took was we are going to provide an application shell that is empty and then allow plugins. And everything in the Jupyter ecosystem is a plugin, even the notebook. And so the notebook interface is a plugin itself. Yeah.
Sort of interrupting before you jump to the plugin model. I guess for CSS, I guess Edgar, you're asking about the tokens, right? So it's like point me if I'm wrong, but I guess like using the design tokens, right, to share this CSS variables across multiple extensions, right?
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Can I do a quick follow-up question? Thank you so much for this. It's super helpful. It's like because we are discussing right now because we have some sort of design tokens that because we have basically material the dashboard and the MUI is the material. They have some sort of design tokens, and they have another set of design tokens on Butterfly. They're one of framework that we're discussing as implementation. How did you define this set of design tokens? Did you take one from those, or you define your own tokens?
We defined our own.
As a baseline. Define your own, right?
Yep. We defined our own, and then we built part of our plugin system includes a theme plugin, and so it's really easy for someone to flavor Jupyter Lab with their own colors and their own stylings, their own themes, their own fonts, all that stuff by simply writing their own theme plugin and then swapping that out. And so everything else just gets automatically applied and inherited. And as long as other plugins, now there's if you're going to write a plugin that people are going to use, there's a little bit of requirement or expectation on the plugin authors to use those variables, right? Like to be nice, to play nice in this ecosystem, your plugin should use those variables so that you're not like, but you could theoretically, and what we've seen is that when someone wants to bring in and integrate something with Jupyter Lab and they want to maintain their theme identity, maybe they're bringing in Kubeflow into Jupyter Lab. They don't want Kubeflow to be flavored with Jupyter Lab. They want it to look like Kubeflow inside of Jupyter Lab as a plugin. They're totally able to do that, and in that sense, it tends to make sense. But if somebody wants a plugin to feel like it's a Jupyter native thing, they can inherit from those CSS variables, and it just works. It just permeates theirs.
Sorry if I ask too much questions. Just
no, you're great.
Yeah, and the second question is because it's the easy part is not easy. Like for variables, themes, and colors. How about the structure of the components? I give you an example. How we do pagination in a table? Do you have a subset of components that people extend? If I'm plugin developer, how I put a pagination library there?
That's right. So we do have a plugin or a sub package that are UI components that Jupyter Lab owns, but because of the plugin system, so and maybe it's helpful to elaborate. Like we spent a lot of our energy thinking about the plugin system, the interface of the plugin, because what we don't want to have is everything always available to all other plugins. Like we don't want plugins to collide too much. So since we defined an interface that strictly constrains their interaction, but still allows cross collaboration through, we call them tokens, which you can just think of as like really, really constrained singletons at the global level, but how one can affect another is only through that interface. And so the plugin that owns its singleton gets to dictate that relationship and that interaction. And in doing that, each plugin can actually show up with their own framework underneath it, their own toolkit underneath it. Now, the only problem with that is, of course, the thing that gets sent up to the front end can get really large really fast. If everyone's showing up, one showing up with React, one is showing up with Material UI for its UI toolkit, one is showing up with some other toolkit, that can get really large. You could be loading a ton of assets into the browser. What we do is we don't make an opinion on that. We have our own little subset of components that we offer that are common across the application, buttons, drop-down menus and stuff. some other more advanced components that you can just use and inherit, and you know that'll work. But you can also show up with your own, and it's fine. And that's what you see people doing. Like a lot of people show up with plugins that have material UI.
So if I understood correctly, because that's one of the things that we're discussing. If I'm doing a plugin and I want to have my own toolkit or my React components, as soon as they follow the design tokens and they're respectful with the environment, they are fine to go.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, I think one of the go ahead, Terry, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, so sorry. And then one last question, if you can expand, if you allow, because one thing that we are looking for also in this architecture and build our micro front end in a way that the platform, like the dashboard, will work as a whole, but also we can allow customers or platforms to take, for instance, Katibu UI or Model Registry UI and embed in their own applications and use those tokens to adhere with the outside thing. Do you have use cases or experience of I'm taking a plugin from Jupyter and reusing in another context for us to learn?
Yeah, that's right. So do we have examples of that? Honestly, no. I haven't come across them, but it's exactly designed that way.
Yeah.
In that, so our plugin interface is a wrapper around whatever you want underneath it. So we have ways to take, if you have like a React component or a Vue component, you can take our plugin API and just set it on top of it, and it will work within Jupyter Lab. You can also take away, like, so those separate things you can import. You can import that React component and use it in something else, and that's exactly what we wanted to do. And in fact, the reason why Andre and I started talking was we did a talk at KubeCon last year where we just took a lot of the Kubeflow UI and stuck it into a Jupyter Lab plugin. Yeah. And it just worked, right? It just worked because we could take the component, wrap it in our plugin system, and it just rendered. Now, if we had built, like if the Kubeflow component was built with those two things in mind, like, hey, I want to render this in Kubeflow and I want to render this in something else, let's just call it Jupyter Lab as a test.
I want this with Model Registry. I want to put Model Registry tab in the Kubeflow inside Jupyter Lab as a plugin. That's why I'm asking those questions.
Exactly. So if I would, like, obviously I'm biased to want things to work in Jupyter Lab, but I really am trying to help people understand that you could just use Jupyter Lab as a way to test if your components are translatable across interfaces. Like, you can really get down to the atomic piece that is the component that should be able to work anything else. And then really all it is, the job of the Jupyter Lab plugin is just to write, how do I take this component and offer ways for it to integrate with things like notebooks inside of Jupyter Lab? Well, they have, we call them, like I said, tokens or signals that say, maybe you want the Kubeflow when you click this button to be able to trigger a notebook opening. The plugin points all exist in Jupyter Lab, and you just have to write like a thin layer to get your component to be able to talk to those if you want them to. If you just want them to work as they do inside of Jupyter Lab, just wrapping them in the plugin is enough. But if you want deeper level integration between the tools, those are also available. And that's hard to do. Like, we made a lot of mistakes along the way. We're just, now we're 8 years into the second step or second stage of evolution in Jupyter to get there. But there might be stuff that's useful to this group that, we can, and I can bring in some people that are more experienced and knowledgeable on the design choices throughout the stages. But that's really helped us. That was our whole vision, was that people would create their own UIs for their own tool, and it would just work in Jupyter Lab side by side in notebooks.
Yeah, I just want to add on this point around tokens and plugins. I think this is very powerful. So the thing is, like, not many UI projects use this model today. So I know that Jupyter, and we discussed this with Zach, has a framework called Lumino, which basically allows you to use these tokens. And the beauty of this, you can basically share some states between multiple micro frontends by reusing shareable tokens, right? And shareable, an ability to actually, as an example, right? You have a Jupyter Lab, you have something in your cell, and you want to like reflect this cell output in your micro frontend, like your extension.
Like a context between two different micro fronts. This is what I mean, right?
Exactly. So the thing is, like, you have to, I guess, use Lumino in that case if we want to implement this kind of, token capabilities, right? But this is very powerful, and I know, Zach, you shared with me that some actually people use this to build a completely different UIs, not like inside Jupyter, right? Like basically multiple tabs, like when like your web applications can work as a desktop app, basically, right?
Yeah, that's right. So like I can share screen. I know we're running long, so let me know when we need to cut this off, but I can I share screen?
Yeah, I think you should be possible. Josh, can you give access to share? Let me see.
I'm not sure that I have to provide access, but maybe you don't see it on the bottom of
No,
Yeah,
let
I
me
think
just,
yeah,
I
try
probably do. Yeah, let me just try. Let me just look here. Make sure I grab the right window here. Can you all see my screen?
Yep.
All right, you see these multi-panels?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so Lumino, what I said in the beginning was we basically decided we need a thing called a shell, and we call it an application shell, and then everything inside that shell is a plugin. We needed ours to feel like a desktop, meaning like we needed a top menu bar, we have a status bar that's not showing up here, side panel, and we wanted side panels on both sides. And then we wanted a main area where you want to be able to open multiple applications side by side. And you need to be able to expand and contract and move. You know, it's got to feel like any of those kind of multi task applications. But everything inside of this box, this is the wrapper that we chose to make, right? This is the plugin wrapper. Anything inside of this panel can be completely isolated and its own full micro front end. It also has opportunities for this blue panel to talk to this red panel. These could be two separate micro front ends next to each other, but there are very clear defined rules that allow them to pass data or pass events or pass triggers or tokens between them. And so the red panel on the right might grant any other panel in this space to be able to, for example, execute a cell. And so it offers that option. And then blue knows that if it's in this plugin ecosystem, it will get a handle to a red panel and have an execute cell method on it that it can call. But it's very strictly constrained. It can't go in and start to probe data inside of that plugin.
I'm sad because I implemented similar thing in my last open source project that's not working. Yeah. To have this context, I can send you the code to have the context to add to talk. It should be two independent microphones to share a shared context object. I can send you the links.
It's the story of open source, right? Is people solving the same problems over and over until they connect. But yeah, so that this was the one Jupyter needed. We needed ours is really like a workspace for doing data science, and so we needed this kind of multi-panel, complex interaction, desktop feel. A little different than I think what Kubeflow needs, but I think the kind of design principles and architecture principles really do kind of exist in both worlds. And so so the question I always ask, like from the open source, is like, what should the open source own? Like ideally, the place where we need to be neutral tends to be, the styling should be accessible for anyone to change through the CSS variable. That's pretty well known case. But then really it's the shell and the plugin interface needs to be fleshed out and owned by the open source. And that allows everyone in if you do that well. And it allows not just everyone in, but allows them to trust your application for the next decade. Because if that plugin interface gets solid, people can they can build something today and not be afraid it's going to break 5 years from now, which we have done poorly. We have don't ask people around the Jupyter community. We've broken that plugin interface on every major release because we're just trying to get it like we haven't gotten it right yet. But it's definitely better today than it was 3 years ago. And there's probably lessons we could record there or write a blog post about to help people avoid those pitfalls in their open source projects. But once you get there, it's powerful.
we are trying to define the baseline of external design tokens. Probably because most of legacy open projects are still in design in material design, so we can start copy and paste and then adapt in the future. And then what I'm trying to propose is to make each sub project be independent and the component library that can use material Y or can use another library. As soon as they set up the standard in order to be integrated in the dashboard, those component libraries is coherent and adherent with this design tokens and respect. If I change a color in a app shell, the color is propagated and everything is aligned. That's why I'm working with Andre and Stefano and others to propose for the community, especially to have these guidelines for new projects.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Yeah, I think the interesting question for us to answer, like, do we need these capabilities of tokens, right? Like, like the ability to integrate, micro frontend to other applications like Jupyter Lab, right? Because
you mean
the context.
one micro frontend talk with the context, right? Just to
context. Yeah,
I think so, Andre. I think so.
Because in that case, I guess like we need to like thinking about, do we want to use Lumino, or like we want to like use we want to like implement something to make sure we can share these tokens. Yeah, because I guess like
Lumino.
Yeah, go ahead.
Lumino just to help there. It was designed specifically. It's really hard to make a desktop experience in a browser. So that's what Lumino, like, that's a problem it solved. Like if you were to do that in React, it would be tricky. You could do it, but it wouldn't be as performant. Like Lumino basically had to invent itself out of pure JavaScript, and the people that wrote that were brilliant. I mean, they focused on efficiency for that experience. So it is a really niche use case. Like if you're not going to do the desktop vibe, meaning that's the layout with multi-panel widgets that are able to kind of flex with one another. I wouldn't necessarily go for Lumino, but if you want that experience, which is really great, that's probably the world's best library for such an experience.
Yeah, I think we don't need a drag and drop like this for the web, but for sure we need to have a solution, Andre, to have this context shared. But as example for the application, at least to share the namespace from the outer world. And in the second stage, they will need interaction for model registry to open a pipeline and to have the context of where this comes from. We need to figure out this as a community as well.
Yeah, that's right. Another thing we did, just as a small sub point, is that we tried to make writing a plugin as easy as possible. So we made everything command driven, meaning that you focus on writing essentially a response to an action, and then that response can be dropped in as a button somewhere, as a drop down menu somewhere, and you connect everything to a command. So it's event triggered. And that's really nice too. Like that experience from a plugin author is great, because all I have to do is focus on defining commands, and then I tell it where to fall into the application.
Yeah, what I did in my last project is a small library that will have a shared variable in the app shell, and you can subscribe for observers in that variable, and then the microservices, micro frontends can observe for notifications. This is what I implemented. Awesome. Yeah.
You want to come work at Jupyter?
Yeah, I hope so. We should collaborate in future, because at least I will have to write those plugins for model registry. Yeah,
totally.
Yeah.
One of my goals that not on Kubeflow is to make the model registry works both in Kubeflow, also in Jupyter, and also in the Visual Studio Code. Ideally with the same. That's why I deal with the same library, and my library will translate the tokens.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's the right way to constraining yourself that way means that you will build something that will
sorry to diverse too much on the front end.
I know it's extremely helpful. I would love to learn more about how we can build these tokens in a way of like they can interact within the central dashboard, in the same time interact within Jupyter Lab. So does Jupyter have any specific constraint we need to follow to reuse these tokens, or it can be more kind of extensible to use different approaches, right? But I think we can definitely discuss this further. Maybe,
if you don't mind, Andre, my suggestion would be to first to figure out the design language that we have agreement of these tokens, because and then I can move forward, because I'll be simple, like if I follow the material Y tokens, can I implement the model registry using the Patternfly React component library? And then on this, we can talk about how the micro frontends will communicate. Otherwise, we'll keep blocking in the conversation.
yeah, that's right. I guess like defining these tokens, it also required a UI kit, right, for us to choose how we can, or it can be in pure CSS.
It can be no. There's two tokens. The first is the design token that is related to CSS variables. This one is easier. For now, we just follow the material design that we have already.
Yeah.
And you can grow this as we have more Kubeflow, as we evolve as a community. The second part is this communication bus between micro frontends that you are calling token, that you can call this like an event system between micro frontends. I think this is the second discussion that we should have, like how I share context between multiple sub-projects of Kubeflow.
Yeah, makes sense.
If we have agreement in the first, we unblock the model registry-wise, and then the second we can discuss like how we communicate. As soon as we integrate model registry, we can go ahead how we communicate to the app shell to figure out which namespace I am. Then how KFP and model registry talk between each other, and we can move forward incrementally, if it makes sense.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. I mean, I would love to definitely learn more like how these design tokens can be shared across multiple, micro frontends, especially, for example, like one micro frontend using Patternfly, second micro frontend using MUI, right, for example. Can we have
sorry.
Yeah, go
sorry,
ahead.
please.
Go ahead.
No, because we have the same tokens from the material Y. It's just a matter of on the React Y library from Patternfly to take those tokens and use the tokens that are coming with the variables to put the variables inside their code.
I see. So all of this kind of, we just need to make sure like, UI kit supports the, like the variables in the CSS.
But in long run, as a community, I will not rely only on copy and paste for the material Y, but we work together to have our own tokens from Kubeflow. Because in that way, we'll become independent even on material design. This is what we mean, like that. Because we have our Kubeflow design tokens that the material kit on MUI use this, and also the Patternfly React token also use this, and then we can survive in future, because when it appears a new one, we can just implement those tokens that we know, and we can move ahead.
Yeah. And also, I guess
it's almost like the variable name is essentially the thing that will persist. Right.
Yeah.
So that's like what Jupyter did is we found that like we needed to define variable names. Whatever we use to apply it to that variable name is fine. We in the early days, I think we used Material UI, and then we took it out and implemented our own. It's always like it takes a lot more time to try to invent your own. So if you can tap into one now, define those variable names, and then swap it out later, that's fine. That's a great way to do it.
Yeah, and this, Andre, it is one of the things that I'm not a UXD person. There is a new science on this, and I can bring Red Hat people that build those design systems to help us to build in the Kubeflow what will be the Kubeflow design tokens for this independently. Yeah. Because I'm not able to. I'm one step on the front end and one step on the back end. I'm not able to solve the type of structural UXD problems. That's why I count with them for the help.
Yeah, good.
Like John.
Question. So, do you review plugins before they published into your registry? I mean, Jupyter plugins.
No, so we don't. So, what we've currently got is they're searchable by their. We basically tag. We have a unique tag that we use on GitHub. I mean, on npm that makes them searchable. And so we can pull in those to, say like, these are what the ecosystem is built. There's nothing that necessarily validates whether or not it's a working plugin, but it won't, the plugin won't successfully load if it runs an exception, and that won't crash the application. Just that plugin will just not get loaded. Now, what we haven't done and provided the community is essentially like a plugin tester, like run your plugin through this test to make sure that it passes everything and it follows the correct interface. If it doesn't, it just doesn't get loaded. So
how do you guarantee the CSS to make look like a unified UI?
Oh, we don't. We don't. It's someone on the author, the plugin author, to make sure that they're using those variables. So because they can show up with their own. It's okay if they show up with their own. It will stand out.
I see.
And so, if somebody wants to, like, if Apple wanted to use a plugin that was written over here, but they wanted, their own colors to be applied to it, they're a little bit at the mercy of that plugin author doing that correctly. If they didn't do it correctly, then that's they can't use that plugin. But they can only not use that plugin, right? The whole rest of the application can be exactly the way they want it.
Josh, I have a question. I know we almost over, like we have 7 more minutes, but go ahead.
Yeah, and I may be off track here from an architecture standpoint, so bear with me. Kubeflow based on Kubernetes. And our need, especially for isolation and authentication and authorization, may be a little different than what you've done in the past. I don't know in Jupyter whether you guys went into that level of like we have. How does the front end, need to be designed to take in, all those things I just talked about? Or does it?
Yeah. So we solved it in that you can, by default, it wants to talk directly to the Jupyter server, and then the Jupyter server is essentially a proxy to whatever other service. And so authentication can be handled from the server side through the Jupyter server. But there's nothing that says you can't have that plugin point at another service and manage its own authentication in its context and its isolated micro front end with some other service. Like you can make, this is just things landing on a page. Now, if you're going to use like cookies and things like that, there's trickiness into how you manage those cookies based on what path they're pointing at. And that's true. That's like iframing stuff. If you put iframes in, there's all kinds of challenges with security when you are bringing in iframes that might have their own authentication cookie that they need, or whatever token-based cookie or cookie-based authentication. So I think Jupyter doesn't try to solve that for you. That's kind of up to each plugin. We do offer a way for you to go through the Jupyter server if you want to let that server be the single place where authentication happens. And then any plugin can talk to that. But if you've got a front end that's talking to a bunch of different services directly from client to all these different services, rather than going through some sort of proxy, that's kind of on the plugin authors.
Yeah, Zach, because one thing that we're trying to also discuss on this after to have a BFF in the front of the front end, because Kubernetes requires a lot of orchestration in order to handle one single view. Some WISE have to talk with 8 or 10 endpoints to fetch all the data that needed and wait for the resource. So we created that BFF. We are discussing to have this in Golang. And then this BFF has all the coordination logic to hydrate the data and don't do overfetching and underfetching. Do you think this makes sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think that's great.
So I have another question, and again, I'm not as familiar with Jupyter, but in Kubeflow, we provide a lot of configuration of the notebooks. So, and that includes even, fairly complex stuff like storage, but, you could think GPU or whatever, the number of GPUs and things like that. I get it that this probably is not something that is that big of a deal for the front end, but have you run into that before? And was there something that you learned about this configuration, this flexible configuration?
So I can answer this question, Josh. I think we view Jupyter as just a virtual ID, and the configuration where you specify GPUs, storage, and something else is like your runtime. So we kind of like separate runtime from the Jupyter frontend, which basically means like if you want to have a GPU running on your notebook, you basically create a kernel which will spin up a GPU instance for you on the cloud. And you basically connect your notebook to this kernel. because we run the remote kernels for our Jupyter instance. We don't do like local kernels similar to what we do in the Kubeflow notebooks. So this is the main differences. It has a lot of advantages for us because we can run Spark clusters within the notebook and connect to the notebook to the Spark cluster, or maybe Dust cluster, or any other cluster that you can create. And this gives a lot of flexibility for users how they configure these parameters, like image, GPUs, resources, volume, and other things by using kernel spec configuration. So unfortunately, today Kubeflow notebooks don't do this. Yeah, but we kind of like solve this differently.
Yeah, the Jupyter stack is three layers. It's kernel talking to server talking to web application.
Yep.
And it sounds like Kubeflow's, when you launch something, you're configuring that whole stack with the resources you need and putting it out here to run. But Jupyter, each thing can run essentially as a microservice on its own, right? It's like the server can be here and it's just a proxy to its kernels. The kernels are the things that are actually the runtime that can blow up to have all the resources you need. The server can stay fixed. It doesn't need much more space. And so your client, the server is really just there to serve the web application, and maybe manage the proxy layer if you have authentication for multiple services or kernels. And then it just routes things coming in from the client to the kernel that's executing the code, or configuring a cluster or whatever.
Yep. Does that answer your question, Josh? Like how?
Yeah, it does. And I figured that was kind of the case, but I thought that we may be looking at a little differently because of our architecture, right? Or at least our historical architecture.
Yeah, like how the Kubeflow notebooks UI web app look like, right? Like how user configure an image, right? The GPUs, parameters, the volume, right? And how they start the basically because for this kind of use cases, you just need one notebook. You don't need Jupyter, right? Like because you're kind of like creating something which should run like for the short period of time, and then you need to shut it down when you don't use it, because you basically you kind of like waste your GPU resources and waste your money on the GPU, which you don't use, right? And this is extremely like, you don't need to actually run your GPU when you don't use it, right? So this actually help you to save compute costs, right, on the cloud. Yeah, but then anyway, this can be a deep discussion. So we're almost over time. So any other maybe last questions for this topic?
I don't. Thank you so much, Zach, for the explanation. I have a ton, but I take a lot of media.
Yeah, my pleasure. If I can, let me know. Reach out anytime. I'm happy to stop by and chat.
Ramesh, do you have a
Ramesh,
question?
go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for taking my question. Not related to this, but I just wanted to remind the guys that a couple of weeks back we presented to the community about the Trusty AI. If you guys can give us some more feedback on that, that I would really appreciate it. I just wanted to remind that one. If you guys can take a look at that, there is a PR we submitted towards this proposal. It details on it. So, yeah, any help in that would be appreciated. Thank you. That's all.
Yeah, I really like the Trusty AI one as well, because it is a feedback that we've gotten from the community. We need more ability to do monitoring, whatever the monitoring means of models. And I think that this is one aspect of it that actually gets to. Another thing that we're seeing is, accuracy and just the making models better is at top concern of all the user surveys. When you look at what comes back, especially on the LLM type stuff, people are most concerned about either data or making the model better, right? So I think this is very important for us to have as a potential priority as we look at the 1 to 10 timeframes and beyond.
Yeah, thank you, Ramesh. I will also try to provide my comments there on this issue, and I think it will be nice if you can also publish this in the Kubeflow Discuss Google group. So for the feedback, did you already publish it? Maybe I missed it.
No, we put the PR in, but it's a good idea. We'll put the link and bring it into Kubeflow.
I tried to put it in the 1.9 blog post, but as what's coming, but you know, I got shot down. Still, I think it's a good thing for us to talk about in a broad sense.
I like the enthusiasm. Yes, I would do that. Yeah, we can definitely bring in. We are looking at all, you know, how we can even support it, and we're looking at ways. But yeah, we'll as a next step. I'm just trying to push the ball a little bit slowly towards, you know, what's is this the right fit? You know, if it's a fit, you know, if even not, you know, could we bring it as an extension? Is another item we could talk about if that we feel that, you know, it doesn't fit quite squarely with you know, in Kubeflow community. You know, options. Yeah, I want to hear, you know, all the inputs, and then we can make a judgment call based on it.
And
Yeah,
you know, I want to be fair to you guys because I know you have other options and things to do. So we probably do need to put a date certain of when we get the community's feedback, just so you guys can decide which way you want to go as well. Because I know sometimes just getting a decision is more important, so you can make, you know, contingencies or whatever you need to be able to do. But I'm one supportive of this, and I'd definitely like to hear what other people say.
what we can do, Josh, that is, you know, once we go through this community review, then if you need to come, the team come back and present in front of the steering committee, just let us know, and we're happy to do that.
Right. All right, we're minutes over. So not a bad, but I mean, timing to kind of close it out. But I found this to be once again very good content, great discussion, interactive. I think this is more of what we need in the community.
So just as a follow-up, so I will work with Andre and others in a draft of a document with this architecture proposal. As soon as we have agreement, because I'm discussing whether there's some points there, we will share with everyone in the GitHub issue.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I think like after
Yeah.
this discussion, let's just, you know, think together what we can, you know, improve in our proposal, and then, you know, propose something to the community. Yeah. And thank you so much for pushing this. Yeah, I think it's extremely.
Oh no, it's my pleasure. I just want to, as I told you, my main goal is to Red Hat with Model Rest be a good citizen in the community, and be beneficial for us, and also don't break out Kubeflow strategy, and also as opportunity to put some guardrails for new projects in future.
Yeah, makes sense. I know over time, Josh. I just maybe will present this cap next week for training V2. Maybe right now, just for the community, like we have a lot of comments already on this Kubeflow enhancement proposal for new API for training operator. So please take a look offline, and I will try to present it next week, next Tuesday, in the community call, what we have been finalized.
Hey guys, if I can get 10 last seconds of the meeting, Andrew and Josh, if you can help me offline on Slack to merge the remaining PR so we can publicly announce Kubeflow 09. I really appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, sure, Ricardo. Just ping us. We will definitely approve it like in the next couple of, you know, few minutes.
All right. Thank you.
Ricardo. Okay.
All right. All right, everyone. I'm going to close out the meeting. Thanks again.